getting our energy from the sun. I think it's important, even when we get very quickly into the details, to remember what what's at stake and why we care about this. So next slide. There are a lot of different ways that we make the electricity that we use in Northern Virginia. I'm going to invite folks to write in the chat some of the ways you know that electricity is made. And to think a little bit about how much of it you think is made. Yeah, we've got some oil, fossil fuels for sure, along with gas and coal. We've got some wind on the grid, as well as some solar. I want you to think a little bit about how, some nuclear. I want you to think a little bit about how much you think is coming from the cleaner sources like wind and solar. We have a poll in case anyone wants to guess. We're going to wrap up the poll and go to the next slide. So it's actually very much more modest than you might think, right? We have very good hopes of moving to more renewable energy, but in fact, when we plug something into the wall, into the outlet in Virginia, more than half of it is made by burning fossil fuels. And it's important to remember that as we think about what it means to try to shift off. We're gonna go to the next slide and just remember that burning fossil fuel, first of all, extracting fossil fuels, mining for coal, drilling for natural gas, are both extremely polluting processes that make people sick all the way along. But I want to just call to mind, more importantly, or very importantly, the impact that burning fossil fuels is having on our climate. So let's go to the next slide. This is really what I want us to just bear in mind as we think together about going solar at home. Our global average temperature has varied, warmer and cooler years have followed each other for the whole entire world year after year, but it's hard not to notice that over the last 150 years, the average around which that zigzag is zigzagging is going up. We have been warming our Earth about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 150 years. And the only explanation for why this is happening, 97% of scientists agree, 7 in 10 Americans understand, that our burning fossil fuels for electricity is pouring heat trapping climate pollution into our atmosphere, causing our Earth to warm. Next slide. And I'm married to a math teacher. He's impressed upon me the importance of slope. So actually, this next graph is even scarier to me. This shows that the rate at which our temperature is going up has been getting steeper and steeper. We're not on a straight line. We're watching things go rapidly, sort of leaving behind the world that we knew, towards a world in which our temperature is much, much hotter. I want to call to mind, I don't have too many more minutes, but I want to call to mind for all of us, some of what you've heard could happen if we don't do anything about this. If we continue to pour heat trapping climate pollution into our atmosphere, causing our Earth to warm. And please share in the chat some of the consequences that you've heard about. Some of the things that a lot are on my mind is that land-based ice at the poles would melt, raising sea level. Some animals would not be able to rapidly adapt in a rapidly warming climate. And Bill McKibben, a climate activist, talks about running Genesis in reverse, that we're seeing so much extinction in this generation. Climate refugees being displaced by not being able to get enough food or water in the places that they live. Stronger storms, wildfires, these are all things that will be more common in a warmer world. Right, all the animals we particularly love, including songbirds, are threatened in a warming climate. And one that really bothers me, right, and I'm going to end with this, somebody talked about insects. So, there's a lot of diseases around the world that are spread by mosquitoes, and that's really where one of the injustices of the climate crisis plays out for me, because there are all these diseases around the world that are spread by mosquitoes, like malaria and dengue fever. And as we warm our earth, those diseases are spreading and are more of a problem than they used to be. And if you think about the parts of the world where malaria is the biggest problem, it's precisely the parts of the world where people did the least to cause climate change. They benefited the least from industrializing and burning those fossil fuels, and yet they're the first to be suffering its effects. Bill McKibben, again, talked about taking an experience in Dhaka, Bangladesh during an outbreak of dengue fever, where he walked through a hospital where people were shivering away from this disease. And he said, you know, the epidemiology isn't perfect, but the moral math works for me. We in this country produce 25% of the world's carbon pollution. If there are 100 beds in that hospital, 25 of them are on us. Really inviting people to take personal responsibility for those of us who are burning fossil fuels and those who are suffering its effects. Let's take a deep breath and go to the next slide. So in a minute, we're going to shift into what we can do about it, which is really important. But I think we all need to get better and better at talking about climate change. Too many of us care about climate change, but we don't talk about it with our friends and neighbors. It even has a name. Sociologists call it the spiral of climate silence. So we have to, if we care about this, we have to cultivate our capacity to talk about it. And we have to get in touch with the reasons we are motivated to take action. So I invite you, in thinking about that quick summary of some of the consequences that burning fossil fuels is going to have on our world, I'd like you to think for yourself, and you can share something in the chat if you want to, or just think for yourself. First of all, why does climate change matter to you? And in coming today, you had a vision of being able to shift to cleaner power and to get solar on your house, and that is going to require some perseverance and some commitment. So I want to also invite everyone to reflect for yourself, why are you personally called to shift to cleaner power? As you think about both of those, continue to share in the chat. I'm enjoying the responses I'm seeing. I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Meg with our friends at Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. One of the things that's so exciting is that about going solar in Virginia right now is that it's actually a better environment because faith communities have successfully advocated for better solar laws. So Meg's going to give us a little bit of context for why we have such a good solar opportunity in Virginia right
now. Thank you, Joelle. Just if someone could switch the spotlight over to me, I'll give it 1 second. Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces in the participants, so it's great, including David Kepley on our board and a bunch of others that are on our advocacy team. So thank you for being here. As Joelle said, I'm going to focus on a couple of components. We often think about some of the most we study the most impactful things we can do as people, and there's all these different levels of action. And a lot of times when we talk about it with faith communities, we talk about the talking, which Joelle just mentioned, the acting, voting, and joining. So I'm going to talk about acting and joining for just a couple minutes. You can go to the next slide. So, I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a couple minutes sharing about how the faith community has played a significant role in creating these opportunities for clean energy that you're going to hear about more a little bit later during this webinar, and choices for Northern Virginians. It's really exciting. So, Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions has been advocating and organizing since 2013. We work locally to create community solutions to climate justice challenges. Next. We, right now, we're a network of over 75 faith communities in Northern Virginia, where we are working on these local solutions to the climate crisis, and we organize in Northern Virginia. Today, we do advocacy, we do other programs, including education and support to green teams. I'm going to focus mostly on our advocacy for today. Next slide. Our primary advocacy campaign is Fairfax to Zero, and it's the umbrella on which all of our advocacy falls under, and it's really an effort to bring Fairfax County to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, if not sooner. We are just in the process of defining our advocacy issues for 2020 to 2021, and you see them listed here. They include items like transportation, waste, tree canopy, housing, justice, and of course, energy legislation. So that's what I want to drill into a little bit more today. The next slide. We accomplish our advocacy through our advocacy teams. It's really the pinnacle of what we do. Right now, we have about 100 individuals that form part of our advocacy teams, which are divided by district in Fairfax County and led by volunteer team leaders in each of those districts. The teams meet regularly with their elected officials, and they come at it from this moral imperative of acting on climate change. Is when we meet with our elected officials, we meet with them as members of the faith community, and that's really what differentiates us and oftentimes disarms the elected officials and opens their ears to the perspective from the faith community. Next slide. Specifically in this last year, most of you probably know, was a huge year for clean energy. Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions specifically advocated for solar freedom, which became effective July 1st of this year. Through our advocacy teams and sending out to our broader network, we sent over 200 letters to legislators during the General Assembly. We also spoke out at the hearing for the General Assembly leading up to that. Our activists played a significant role in getting this legislation passed. It's just really important. Next slide. I'm not going to go into the details. I don't have a lot of time, but solar freedom essentially eliminated a number of barriers to solar in Virginia, including things like net metering, increasing the cap on power purchase agreements, and so forth. And that enabled, we can go to the next slide. I know I'm running out of time here. What that did, especially the raising the cap on the power purchase agreement, allowed Fairfax County to pursue an RFP that they already had in place for what will be, the largest to date solar installation in Virginia by a local jurisdiction. And without this legislation, they could have only done a fraction of that project. So it's just really important. Next slide. So I just want to note that you are all, and put a plug in here, that you are all welcome and invited to participate in our advocacy teams. We organize in Fairfax County. We're also exploring Arlington and Alexandria. So please reach out to me. You have my contact information here. We'll be working on energy legislation moving into 2021. And we'd love to get you involved in our advocacy teams. Thank you so much.
So we're gonna invite Reverend Laura to introduce her congregant, Paul, and they're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to go solar with, and we need to unshare the screen so that they can fill our view here. There we
Great.
go.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joelle and everybody. I am, as she said, Reverend Laura Martin. I'm Associate Pastor at Rock Spring UCC in Arlington. And I also serve on the steering committee of Interfaith Power Light. And our congregation has embraced green in a variety of ways that I won't describe in detail today, but one of the elements is what people can do at home. And so I am thrilled to be able to introduce Paul Fuss. He and his family went solar through Sun after hearing about them in 2016. And so we're going to talk just for a couple minutes about his experience. So Paul, welcome. And why don't you tell us what it was about Sun in particular that led you to choose to go solar with them?
Well, my wife and I, we had been talking about having a solar installation for years for a lot of the reasons that Joelle touched on at the top. Just with, you see everything that's going on with climate change, and we really felt like we wanted to do what we could at home to to try to combat that. And it was one of those things where we just it's a little bit more, I don't know, intimidating, I guess, to me at least, to do an installation like that rather than, say, opposed to, a typical contracting project where it's a little more straightforward, I thought. So it just happened that I saw an ad for one of these workshops similar to what we're doing today in Arlington a few years ago. It was the fall of 2016. And so I attended, and they provided the same sort of information. And it just really seemed like a great opportunity. It's something we'd wanted to do. And they, the co-op, I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more later, but they do all the legwork in terms of research and finding a reputable contractor. And when you get people together, you can really save some money on your installation. So it really seemed like it was something we were looking to do, and the co-ops just seemed like a great way to go about it.
So you've talked a lot about how you were drawn in. What was the experience like for you? And could you also mention if you got any support like after the installation was finished?
Sure. Yeah. So we at the co-op we signed up, expressing our interest, and then the co-op had already gone through the phase where they had selected some contractors to do the installs, and so we were contacted by one of the installers, and they set up an appointment, came out, and the first thing I have to do is a home evaluation to look at your particular situation and see how well suited you are for a solar. So they came out and did that, provided estimates with a range of options, including price and power and everything like that. And we just had to, select the one that worked best for us. And from that, signing the contract, then really everything was taken care of. The install took a day and a half, and all the net metering and the contacts with Virginia Power and the permitting with the Arlington County, that was all taken care of. So it was really easy, and just a really positive experience.
And then
you mentioned just we've had, in terms of follow-up, everything came with a 25-year warranty, all of our equipment. So we've had no issues at all with the hardware. We did have, within the last year, we had some raccoon issues trying to get into our roof, and they made their way under the panel. So we had to get some repairs done, and the installer that did the initial work, it was no trouble getting them to come out. They have to remove 3 or 4 panels so the roof repairs can be done, and then they come back. You just schedule it, and they'll put them right back on. But while that's being done, the other panels can remain active, so you're still collecting and generating power.
That's great. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be some more questions for Paul coming up later, but now we're going to turn it back to Aaron from Sun.
you. Let me, hopefully we have the right one. All right, you guys, everybody hear me okay? Well, my name is Aaron Such, and I'm the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director for Solar United Neighbors. I'm joined here by my colleague, Jessica Hamilton, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the solar EV kind of technology and co-op part of this information session. And I really wanted to thank our partners, the communities of faith, Joelle, Meg, Paul, and everybody who takes it from kind of a slightly higher angle. Our job is to help you with the why or with the how to go solar, not so much with the how. And that's what really we're going to be speaking of today. Just a real quick primer on COVID, kind of the elephant in the room. With all of our co-op and all of our programming work, health and safety are #1 priority. So everything is virtual, of course, including this. So I'm sure everybody is very familiar with the Zoom meetings. But it's important that solar work and our co-ops continues, because solar really is vital to resiliency, job creation, clean air, and reducing energy burdens. As we recover to a sense of normal or a new sense of normal, solar really is a part of that recovery. So we're, again, monitoring the situation, working very closely with installers. So just a real quick primer about who we are. We're an organization that started by accident. In fact, my boss, who's pictured on the right-hand corner, her name is Anya Schoolman. She saw the movie Inconvenient Truth in 2007 with her son, Walter, who was 13 at the time, and his friend Diego. And they were so motivated to take action after watching this movie that they decided the best thing to do would be to go solar on their row house in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood of Washington, DC. So this was 2007, and at that time, they came across two really large barriers. The first barrier is that the price to go solar was more than 3 times the cost of what it is to go solar now. And secondly, they didn't really understand a lot of the components or what was in the bid, didn't know how to compare apples to apples. So she thought, if it was going to be such a heavy lift, why not maximize the impact and take the whole neighborhood solar? So she underestimated her son's ability for community organizing. Him and Diego turned it into a school project. They put flyers on all the doorsteps in Mount Pleasant. And after a short period of time, they had about 100 people that were interested in going solar as part of a group, as part of a solar co-op. Think of it as just kind of a loose-knit group of neighbors that work together. Well, after 2 years, she took 45 people solar as part of the Mount Pleasant Solar Cooperative. So Solar United Neighbors, at the time we were known as Community Power Network, literally started with a mom and her son just working in their spare time to help people go solar. So fast forward now to 2020, we are a nonprofit organization that works in 12 states, been in Virginia since 2014. And we represent a constituency of solar owners. So we work in 3 different distinct areas. We help people go solar through our co-ops, which I'll be talking about here in a second. We also help people join together. So it's really important, I think, as Paul mentioned, to have that support through the process of going solar, joining together with fellow solar advocates. And then, as Meg mentioned, the other aspect is fighting for our energy rights. So what we really do is mobilize a very diverse group that is nonpartisan, diverse demographics to fight for fair energy rights. And that's really been what we've done in Virginia, in addition to the Solar Freedom and Virginia Clean Economy Act. Solar United Neighbors led the coalition to pass a rule that makes it, or legislation that makes it harder for homeowners associations to unreasonably restrict solar. So that's something we're really proud of. As an organization, we've done about 3,800 installations in all of the 12 states we work. That's about 36 megawatts worth of installed capacity. Here in Virginia, since I started in 2014, and in fact, when I started, our office in Washington, D.C. was still Anya's house. So we've come a long way, but we've done about 7 megawatts worth of installed capacity, about 890 installations and counting. and about 10,000 solar supporters, probably something that we're most proud of. So we're here to help you. You know, our credo is that we're here to help you with the tools to make the right decision for you to go solar or adopt an electric vehicle. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the co-op process first, and then go into some of the basics of solar technology, including how solar works, and then take some time for questions. Just a reminder, I'm sharing my screen, so I would appreciate any verbal cues as I can't see the chat. But so how does a solar or EV co-op work? Well, you could think of it as, again, a loose-knit voluntary buying group that addresses some of those barriers that Anya faced with group pricing and then support throughout the process. It gives folks an opportunity to join the solar movement. You can connect with other solar supporters, people or folks that are able to join, homeowners, businesses, farms, nonprofits. So it is open to all of you. And again, it's voluntary to join. But the reason why we have these info sessions is we want folks to have a good understanding of if solar is going to be the right fit for you. So good news, you've done the first step, which is learning about solar and learning about the co-op process. So to unpack that a little bit more, Solar Co-op, again, is a concentric group, a voluntary buying group that works in a concentric geographic area. In fact, this one is called the Arlington Solar EV Co-op, but it is open to all of greater Northern Virginia, Fairfax, Alexandria, Vienna, all greater Northern Virginia. And it's about a 9-month process. And we separate it into a couple different phases. The launch phase, which I'm going to talk about, the installer selection, and then the installer site visits, proposal, and installation phase, which we're in right now. But the first phase really is we encourage folks to learn about the co-op, attend an info session, visit our website. We are probably very redundant about giving you a lot of the basic information about solar so that you know if it's a good fit, you know how to determine pricing or payback times on your proposal, and of course you know how the components work. And then if it is a good fit, at 1:15, we're going to invite you all to sign up online at no obligation. And when you do sign up, we're going to welcome you to the group. We're going to do a roof screening to determine if your roof is a good fit. And again, ask you to grow the group. So a lot of our outreach depends on organic word of mouth. So as a co-op member, we ask you to, let your friends know, your neighbors know on Nextdoor that there's this group happening. And that moves us to the next phase. When we typically have 30 people or more as part of the group, we issue a request for proposal for an installer to bid on the group. And that's where the economics of scale come into play. You could think of it simply as, helping or, a group of more, 50 or more people allows an installer to have some significant economics of scale. About half the cost of a residential installation is what's called soft cost or non-component. And that could be customer acquisition, sales, permitting, doing site visits. So the idea with the co-op is you have a group of well-qualified, educated homeowners, 50 plus. In fact, right now the group is, I think, closer to 110 people. It allows the installer to save significant costs just on those non-component costs. So as part of that, we issue a request for proposal, which is basically saying, hey, installers, we've got a group of 30 people to start with, but we're going to grow it to much more. Offer us your best component or competitive price package. And then after that, once we get all the bids back, we're going to do all of the technical follow-ups, make sure the proper licensing is there, do any follow-ups for the bid. Then we convene a selection committee made up of co-op members. So this is where the process is really stakeholder driven. So this is something that we facilitate, but we really encourage all of the participants to get involved. So it's about maybe a month or so ago, we convened a virtual selection committee made up of co-op members, co-op participants like you all, and they selected a single installer to serve the group. And then once the installer is selected, they're going to reach out to people as we move on to our next phase to schedule a site visit. And that site visit, they're going to ask you for a copy of your utility bill, get an idea of what your goals are for solar. That's really important to have a good idea of what your budget and your goals are in mind for going solar. And then they're going to offer you a customized proposal based on the co-op pricing and component package. So, you know, one person might have a proposal with high efficiency panels, or one might have an electric vehicle charger or battery backup, which we're seeing a lot more. But everything comes in at this competitive pricing package. And then after that, once you get your proposal, you have 30 days to sign a contract. You could think of this as a sale. It's not fair to ask the installer to extend that pricing indefinitely. You have 30 days to sign that proposal at the co-op price. And then, of course, you're going to install your system, which Paul mentioned. I think it's the installation itself is about a day or so, pretty quick. And then my favorite part of the process is the party. In pre-COVID times, we would meet at a bar or maybe somebody's house and exchange stories about or a slideshow with people showing off their system. But during this whole process, I cannot stress enough, at any time, we're here to support you. So if you get your customized proposal, a common part of what we do is we'll help you understand it, compare it. Maybe you got another proposal from outside of the co-op. Again, we're there to help you during the process of going solar and even after. So, you know, a couple years from now, you may have questions about registering your SRECs, or maybe you have a question about squirrel damage. We get a lot of issues with rodents, squirrels, and raccoons, but we're here to support you through that whole process. And then, you know, some people are very excited to become solar evangelists. You know, what we've seen is somebody goes solar, then they want to talk about the process with their friends or neighbors, maybe get involved in advocacy. As Meg mentioned, really the most powerful advocates are folks that have solar. They can speak from an authoritative perspective. Or you just might be one of those people that says, hey, I got my installation. I'm done with it. I'm ready to be left alone. Either way is fine. So that is part of the co-op process. And again, we have a lot of resources about that too, but that's an overview. And we're, of course, at the site visit and installer phase, where people are getting their site visits from the selected installer. So what do I do? Again, as a co-op member, there is no obligation to join. And at 1:15, we're going to stop and give you that opportunity. Key part is learn about solar. Solar is a big ticket item. So really be an informed consumer, learn how it works, learn, you know, all of the terminology so that you can make an informed decision. Of course, spreading the word and growing the group is a really important part of the process. We had our RFP phase, in which if you're interested, you could have helped select the installer or not. Be ready for your site visit and proposal. So when I say be ready, make sure you have a budget in mind, make sure that you have your goals in mind, make sure you confer with the wife or the husband so that you're on the same page. And then after you sign your proposal, you have the installation phase. And then lastly, celebrate and fight for solar rights or not. Again, as I mentioned, you may be interested in getting involved after the fact, or you may not, but that is up to you. So I'm going to just give a real basic primer of how solar works and go into a little bit about electric vehicle charging and then how the economics work as well. So when you're talking about solar, there's two different types of technology. There is solar photovoltaic and solar thermal, essentially two ways to harness the sun's energy. Down at the bottom, you have solar thermal. And that's using the sun's heat to heat hot water for bathing or in a pool, or even a passive design if you have that type of house. That's a great technology, but we're going to be speaking about solar photovoltaic, or PV. And that converts the sunlight into electricity. In fact, photovoltaic is just a combination of two words. Photo, meaning light, and voltaic, voltage. So you are producing electricity with sunlight. And you could think of solar PV system as a generator with no moving parts, a free source of fuel, and a 25-year virtually maintenance-free lifespan. The panels themselves are warranted 25 years. The major components like inverters are warranted 10 to 25 years. But of course, the main part of the system is going to be your solar panel. So solar panels are measured in wattage, just like the old incandescent light bulbs. If you bought a 50-watt incandescent light bulb, that would consume 50 watts at any given moment. Well, a panel is measured in the wattage that it is able to produce at any given moment. So a 300-watt solar panel would produce a maximum of 300 watts of power. But it'd be very rare that you would just have a single solar panel. Home and business solar systems have a solar array, which is multiple solar panels, which are measured in kilowatts. So if you have 4 250-watt panels, that would be 4 times 250, 1,000 watts, or a kilowatt for short. So I'm going to throw a little bit of vocabulary at you. The main part is kilowatts, and system is a system size. So PV systems are measured in kilowatts. So of course, solar is a system of different components. You have a racking system. So depending on what type of roof you're going to have, a racking system that's able to accommodate it. Pictured is an asphalt shingle roof. You may have a TPO rubber membrane roof if you have one of those row houses in Arlington. You may have a standing seam metal roof. You're typically going to have a racking system that's able to accommodate that. The only outlier is if you have a slate roof. Slate roofs are really difficult to install on. Some installers will not install on them, or if they do, it's going to be at a significant higher price because it's a delicate install. But you may have a racking, you're going to have a racking system that's going to affix the panels to the roof. Or if your roof isn't a good fit, maybe you're going to have a ground-mounted system, which we'll see an example later. Your other component is going to be your inverter. So your panels produce direct current electricity, but your home or business is going to use alternating current. So your inverter is going to convert that direct current into alternating current. It's, you could think of it as a power conditioning device. It conditions the power and makes it usable. There's a couple different types of technology. What you see pictured is a string inverter. You might have a micro inverter or a system with a DC power optimizer. But the concept is the same. It makes that power usable. So just to put all these concepts together, with the terminology, your system size is going to be measured in kilowatts. So just to give you a little example there, you have 12 250-watt panels. 12 times 250 is 3,000 watts, or a 3-kilowatt system. The system size measured in kilowatts. Electricity production is going to be measured in kilowatt hours. So even though they are similar sounding, they are apples and oranges. Kilowatt hour or electricity production is going to depend on the size of your system in kilowatts, but also the way that it's angled, if it has shading or not. The good news is that an installer is going to tell you exactly what a system on your particular property is going to produce, given your site-specific considerations. Most homeowners install anywhere between about a 3-kilowatt or a 12-kilowatt system. And one of the most common questions we get in our line of work is, well, I have a 2,000 square foot home. How much solar am I going to need, and how much is it going to cost? And that's a question I cannot answer honestly. And that's because I don't know a couple different things. You could have two 2,000 square foot homes, completely identical, but they could have completely different. One might heat with gas, one might heat with electricity, one might have 2 people living in it, the other might have 5. So the best way to determine what your needs are going to be is look at a copy of your utility bill. That's the first thing that your installer is going to ask for. And it's not because it makes for fun reading, it's because it has your annual usage in kilowatt hours over your 12 months. So first, you're going to look at what you consume. And then the second part is they're going to ask, well, what are your goals? what do you want to do with solar? You don't really have to go all or nothing. And what makes this possible is the fact that a majority, about 99% of the systems deployed in Virginia and nationwide connect to the grid. It's what's called a grid-tied system. And if I go through the schematic, here's how it works. Your solar panel converts sunlight to direct current. And then number two, your inverter converts that electricity. It conditions that power, makes it usable, turns it into AC. And then your home takes that electricity. In fact, if you have panels up on your roof, that electricity, if the sun is shining, is, going to be flowing into your air conditioner or your computer, your refrigerator, or your lights, whatever consumes electricity. Now, a purely grid-tied system does not have battery storage. So let's just say you have you have your panels up, it's a nice summer day, or maybe you're on vacation for 2 weeks during the summer. You don't have anything turned on, no electric loads, as they're called, turned on to consume electricity. What happens to that power? Well, with a purely grid-tied system, you're spinning your meter backwards and you're getting that extra electricity credited on your bill. And it kind of works like rollover minutes. Remember when cell phones used to do that? So whatever you don't use or produce a surplus of, that's going to be applied to your bill for usage of the power that you're not using from solar, say during periods of low production when it's cloudy or at night. So the take-home message is, with grid-tied net metering technology, is everything is an annual billing cycle. The installer is going to look at what you use. You might have daily or seasonal surpluses. In fact, it's really common for a net metered system to have surpluses during certain times of the day, maybe when people are at work during normal times or in certain times of the season. And that's going to be a percentage of annual offset. So with the solar system, you don't have to go all or nothing. In fact, you may have a limited budget that you can only size a system to produce 30 or 40% of your electricity needs. That's okay. All the way up to 100 or even 150%, which we have that with additional legislation that allows people to oversize the system. But you're going to get a full one-to-one credit. So that's how the technology works for net metering. There's a lot of advantages to a purely grid-tied system. One disadvantage, however, is if the grid goes out and you do not have battery backup, your solar system is not going to work. And that's counterintuitive to a lot of people. They think, well, I should have power. Well, that's actually a safety mechanism. If you're backfeeding the grid and the utility has linemen out there working on it, that's a safety issue. So if you have a purely grid-tied system, your panels will not work in a grid outage. So if you want to have power during an outage, you're going to have battery backup. We're seeing a lot more interest in that with COVID, and just as a technology matures and gets more accessible. So the advantage, of course, you're going to have backup power, but the disadvantage is down to the bottom is it's going to be a higher cost, a little bit more maintenance and complex system. But battery backup may be a good fit if you have frequent utility outages. You may have critical energy needs like well pumps or medical equipment, and now as we work from home, communications equipment. It is the best way to have to be prepared for emergencies or disasters. So we're seeing it in Florida, Puerto Rico with the wildfires in California. On-site solar with battery storage for backup is the best way to keep the lights on. Might also have advanced utility rates. So Dominion is rolling out a pilot next year in which time of use, in which you have variable rates based on the time of day, based on peak demand. That's a voluntary rate. So you should see some advantages to discharging batteries when energy is expensive and then storing it when it's cheaper again. So you have access to that voluntary rate. So that's a storage overview. We have a really good battery storage guide. I don't know, Jessica, if you might be able to put that in the chat. We also have a recorded battery storage info session that we've done as part of our groups. So really quickly on what makes a good site for solar, and then I'll get into some of the electric vehicle charging elements and then the economics. What we're doing when we're looking for a good fit is determining a few factors. Does your roof face in a southerly direction? Chances are it will not, but that is the best orientation for sites in the northern hemisphere. As you face south, you're facing into the equator, so south facing is ideal. You can still go solar with an east or west facing roof. You will just have a little bit less production. What you want to avoid is your best surface for solar being north. It will still work, but it will significantly reduce the performance and increase your payback horizons and really isn't recommended. Also, we're looking at shading. So this is an art rather than a science because the sun is at different angles during certain times of the day or season. So we're looking at trees, we're looking at dormers or gables or chimneys. And the basic rule of thumb is you want an open window of solar access on your roof from about 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Next, do you have enough space to mount panels? So the panels are about 3.5 by 5.5 feet long each. So you're going to want a flat, unobstructed roof space. A simple rule of thumb for a minimal system is about 200 square feet of unobstructed roof space. And then lastly, it's not on here, but how old is your roof? If you have to replace your roof, you're going to want to avoid going solar before that time because the panels themselves are going to last 25 years plus. What you want to avoid is putting solar on your roof and then having to pay somebody to uninstall them, store them, and then reinstall them if you re-roof. So again, another simple rule of thumb is if you have less than 10 years on your roof, it's a good idea to go solar either after you replace your roof or at the same time. And I'm going through this at a pretty good clip, and after we do the sign up at 1:15, I'm sure there'll be some questions, so we'll be able to take those questions. Going into solar and electric vehicle chargers, we like to think of solar as a local fuel. And we got into electric vehicle chargers because we discovered just by data that people that want to install solar also want electric vehicles and vice versa. And if you think of solar as a source of fuel, think of electricity as a pretty amazing source of fuel. In terms of energy, it's a very high quality form of energy because think of all of the things that you can do with electricity. You can heat, cook, cool, pump water, run medical equipment, run communications equipment. And now with electric vehicles, you can produce your vehicle fuel with energy that you produce on your rooftop. So as part of this co-op, we rolled it out actually about two and a half years ago, our first EV charger element of the co-op. And part of the co-op, or you're able to install level 2 chargers. Really quickly before I get into the technology, if you're motivated by climate change, I would say that there's probably no better thing that you could do than switch to an electric vehicle and power it with solar. In the Commonwealth of Virginia and nationwide, our leading source of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, is through now transportation. It used to actually be power generation. So if you replace that electric vehicle charger or that gas vehicle with an electric vehicle, power it with solar, you really have essentially zero emission transportation. So level 2 chargers, just a real quick primer. The level of electric vehicle chargers is based on the type of electric infrastructure that's required, as well as the rate at which they charge. So if you think of infrastructure, in fact, you might look around your living room or wherever you're sitting, chances are you're going to see a level 1 charger, and that's simply a 120 volt outlet. Very simple infrastructure, but the charging rate, which is the second factor, is going to be slow. And if you think of your electric vehicle battery as a barrel of water, charging it with a level 1 charger would be like filling it up with your kitchen faucet. Yeah, you could fill it up, but it would take a while. So moving on to level 2, it's a faster rate of charge, and that's what we're offering as part of the co-op. So it's a little bit more robust infrastructure. So it's a 240 volt outlet, and that would be similar to what you would use for an electric clothes dryer or an electric range. installed by a professional electrician, but the rate of charge is much faster. So a level 1, you might get 5 miles per charge of hour. The level 2, you're going to have a faster rate of charge, anywhere between 10 to 30 and even 30 plus, depending on your vehicle. So that electric vehicle charger, or the level 2, would be like filling up that barrel of water instead of with your kitchen faucet, would be like filling it up with a garden hose. So it would be a more robust level of being able to fill up your battery. So there are a variety of units and brands. We often say networked is the best practice. Network means it has Wi-Fi capability, and that's especially good if you're thinking of getting on more advanced rates with your utility, or if it's a commercial structure and you want to keep track of charging. The typical warranty of the unit itself, and there's a variety of units and brands, is 3 years. Just a couple examples of...
Aaron, I'm going to jump in really fast and just give you a time reminder that we're at 1 o'clock. And I know if some people have to jump off early, I want to make sure you see in the chat that there is a link that you can click and sign up to see if your roof is a good fit for solar. We're going to do that as a group at 1:15, but just wanted to make sure if anyone has to jump off at 1 that you know about that. And Aaron, please continue.
Thanks, Claire. Appreciate it. Yeah, we just have a couple more slides and I'm going to get to the economics, so we should be good for about 1:15. So here's a couple examples of level 2 charging. On the left-hand side, you have a public or commercial pedestal charger. You might have on your residential system a charger that connects to your wall. The pricing is going to depend on the type of installation it is. You could see on the right-hand corner, that's a pretty simple installation. Whereas doing a pedestal mount where there might be some underground wiring or alteration of electric infrastructure is going to be a little bit more expensive. So again, as part of this group, you can either go solar, you can do solar with an electric vehicle charger, or you can just do an electric vehicle charger by itself. All right, so speaking about economics, I'm going to move on to this next couple of slides, and then we'll turn it over for the for people to sign up. A few considerations when you're thinking of solar economics. First and foremost, solar is priced by the watt, not by the panel. So that's really important. A lot of our work, we compare proposals outside of the co-op. We actually have a membership program for areas not served by the co-op. We do a lot of proposal comparisons. So it's important to know that, again, your solar is priced by the watt, not by the panel. You could have a 1 kilowatt system. It could be 4 250 watt panels, or it could be 3 333 watt panels, but you're going to be paying by the watt. Next, solar is a long-term investment. You know, again, no moving parts, a 25-year lifespan. The inverters and the panels are warranted. The inverters are warranted anywhere from 10 to 25 years. The panels have a 25-year warranted lifespan. And again, just not a lot of things that can go wrong. What you're doing is hedging against rising utility rates. So the average residential utility rate rises about 2 to 3% per year. So you're locking in the price that you pay if you go solar. Dominion rates have risen about 30% in the last 10 years, and I would say they'd be projected to go at a pretty similar trajectory. Additional pricing and investment before I get into kind of more of a fun slide is that our work in Virginia, we see an average of about a 9 to 13 year return on investment time frame. Now this is going to depend on the site and pricing. Again, with the co-op, you're going to get a really competitive price, so that's most likely going to reduce your return on investment horizon. But if you have a really good site for solar, chances are it's going to be a better return on investment than one that has a lot of shade or you know, where the panel performance isn't that great. For a residential system, we like to say, you know, that the average, again, another common question is, well, what's the average price of a solar system? And average is the middle of many extremes, but from our work in Virginia, we've seen on a home, expect around a $15,000 price. This is before incentives, but you can get into a small system for well under $9,000. Conversely, large systems, on farms or larger commercial properties can be well over 20,000. So that's really where it's smart. If you have an energy efficient home, you can really maximize a smaller system. But as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to go all or nothing. So if you have a real big budget constraint, you could get into a system that might produce 30 or 40 or 50% of your energy usage. All right. So the last slide, it has a lot of numbers, and the numbers themselves aren't as important as some of the concepts. So what I'd like to do is walk you through how solar is priced so that you as a solar consumer have the tools to compare, whether it's through the co-op or outside of the co-op. You should be able to look at a proposal, know how the system is priced, know what your revenue streams are, and then be able to make a determination as to how it pays off. So our average, if you look at the chart, our average Virginia solar co-op pricing is $2.75 a watt. I will tell you that for this group, we have a pricing from our installer, Sustainable Energy Systems, at $2.30 a watt. I'll repeat it, $2.30 a watt if you want to write it down. But this chart gives you just kind of an example of how the pricing works. So on the columns, you have two sample systems, a 4 kilowatt system or an 8 kilowatt system. Your system might be 5.7 kilowatts, but this is to illustrate how the systems are priced. So to determine your turnkey price, again, these systems are installed, designed, permitted by the installer. So there's nothing that you as a homeowner have to do. So 4 kilowatt, if you take 4 kilowatts or 4,000 watts times $2.75 a watt, you have an $11,000 system. That's your price right there. Or an 8 kilowatt system, again, is just 8,000 watts times $2.75 a watt would be 22,000. Now let's get into how your system pays back. So what are your revenue streams? Well, the main revenue stream is an incentive, the federal tax credit, which now in 2020 is 26%. And that is a federal tax credit. It's not a deduction. And it is for folks that do pay federal taxes. So to get the tax credit, you do have to have a tax liability. You do have to pay federal taxes. It's at 26%. Next year, it drops down to 22%. So it's unclear whether or not after that it will be at the same price. So for this year, we're calculating it at 26%. So 26%, if you're looking at the 4 kilowatt column at $11,000 would be $2,850. And what you would do is the year that you get your system interconnected, so if you get it interconnected before December 31st of 2020, you would file for that 26% federal tax credit and then get that credit on your taxes. All right. So after your first year monetizing that tax credit, you have an $8,150 net cost. Unfortunately, in Virginia, we do not have any state tax incentives. We don't have any Virginia tax incentives, unlike Maryland. So that's the bad news. The good news is it makes it a little bit easier for me to explain. So you have your tax credits or any other incentives if you live in a market outside of Virginia. Your next revenue stream, I'm going to skip down to your electricity savings. Then we'll talk about the solar renewable energy credit. The next revenue stream is going to be your electricity savings. So that is the amount of electricity that your solar system produces over the course of the year, multiplied by the price that you pay per kilowatt hour for your utility. And that's going to vary just based on the production of your system and then the price of electricity. As it rises, of course, your electricity from solar becomes more valuable. And again, your installer is going to give you a really good idea of what your system is going to produce in terms of electricity during the course of the year and how much that value is going to be. It's also pretty common that they might estimate a 1 or 2% escalation as energy rates increase. So again, you have your electricity savings over the first year, an estimated 10-year savings cumulative, and then over the course of the life of your system, you're going to have of course, your estimated lifetime savings. Where things get a little bit more challenging to explain is your other revenue stream, solar renewable energy credit, or SREC as it is known. That's a production-based incentive. And the way that works is in states that have a renewable portfolio standard, which is basically a mandate that tells the utility they have to produce a certain percentage of their electricity from solar. If they don't meet it, they have to pay a penalty. It gives a value to a solar homeowner. You could think of it as if your system was, your solar system was a well of water, and for every 1,000 gallons of water that your system produced or your well, you get a little certificate that has a value. And that's what an SREC is. So a 4 kilowatt system might produce maybe 4 or 5 SRECs a year. And depending on the type of legislation or renewable portfolio standard the state has, you're going to get a value for that. Now, to make a long story short, Virginia used to be able to sell out of state to Pennsylvania market. That closed. And for the last couple of years, solar renewable energy credits, or SRECs, were very low value or no value. One of the good things about the Virginia Clean Economy Act is that it does have what's called the Clean Energy Standard or Renewable Portfolio Standard. And so it looks like we're going to have some type of value for SRECs in the future. Now, that remains unclear. There's a lot of rulemaking that has to happen at the SCC. We're going to be advocating for it. But the take-home message is that you're going to have some sort of production incentive, production-based incentive for your SRECs. And that's why we fight so hard for policy in Virginia. I'm going to leave just on this last note and give about a minute left, and I think we're probably close to doing the sign up. And this is why we join people like Meg and all of the advocates to fight for fair solar policy, because in places like Washington, DC, you might have an SREC value for a 4 kilowatt system instead of maybe $15 or $20 a year. Because of their strong policies, maybe $1,500 or $2,000 a year, just because of those strong SREC policies. So that's why we fight really, really hard to advocate on the behalf of Virginia solar owners, because we believe that somebody in Virginia should have just as many opportunities to take advantage of robust incentives that somebody in Maryland or DC does. So again, I hope that this was illustrative in helping you understand how your proposal works. We have a lot more information, but really our goal is to help give you those tools as a consumer so that you can look at a proposal, see how it's priced, what your revenue streams are, and how it pays back. So with that, I think we will turn it over to Joelle, and tell me if you need me to stop sharing my screen or if we need to just have the music and link for folks to sign up.
Why don't you stop sharing your screen and we can have all the panelists visible. So we just want to invite everyone to take a deep breath at this point and take a moment together to fill out the form on the sign up page. And I'm going to pop it into the chat again. You're going to go to this link and you're going to click join our co-op and enter, scroll down and enter your information, and that will commence the process for seeing if your house is a good fit and finding out what the pricing would be for your situation. We want to kind of do this in community all together. So I'm going to play a little musical interlude for a few minutes, and that's going to mark that we are going to spend this time all taking action together by filling out the form. Okay, friends, we are formally ending the official program, but we are continuing to answer any questions you have. We'll take the questions from the chat as well as field questions that folks want to ask live if they want. One question we got that I'll start Erin off with, which I think a lot of people might be wondering is, for folks who just filled out the form right now and put their addresses in, how long can they expect to wait to hear about whether their house is a good fit for the co-op?
Great question. So yeah, when you fill it out and you press submit, you get a welcome email, and we aim to do your roof review in about a day or two. So you should be hearing back from us relatively quickly. And then you know, once we screen your roof, we'll divide it into 3 different categories, like qualified, looks really good, open sun orientation. Maybe qualified means like, yeah, it's a good fit, but there's a few things that don't make it ideal. And then not qualified, which would be, you know, if I were to look for your house and I can't see it because it's in the middle of a forest, that probably wouldn't be a good fit. So just to resume, to hear from us in 1 or 2 days max, and you always feel free to reach out in the meantime too.
I'm looking for other questions, or if anyone else is seeing questions come in that they want to refer to the whole group. Well, I guess I wonder, you had some sample pricing that I know is a sample on the 4 kilowatts and the 8 kilowatts example, but the actual pricing that the Virginia Co-op has secured will not be disclosed until somebody signs up. Can you give us if it's better than what you showed there?
Yeah, and really, I mean, I can share it. I shared it before. It's $2.30 a watt, and the reason why we are a little bit reticent to share it in public forums is we want to be fair to the installers. And $2.30 is, you know, not an off the street price. This really is part of the special group for folks that are part of the co-op, that are in this concentric group. Again, we try not to publish it just because, you know, if somebody goes solar outside of the group or outside of the co-op, you're going to see probably significantly higher prices. So we don't want folks to mistake that that's all of a sudden the new pricing in Virginia. It really is for this group. So I'll repeat, $2.30 a watt. We do get very competitive pricing.
That's incredible. So I hope folks were listening for that part. We have a good question coming in from my friend Sevim at Green Muslims, which is, what if what's being evaluated is on Google Earth, but something has changed since that picture was taken, like a big tree is no longer there?
Fantastic question. Yeah, there is a notes part, I believe, on the form. So it says, is there anything else we should know? So a good example is, hey, we removed that big oak tree on the south facade of our house, or we just re-roofed, you know, and we've got a new roof type. Those are things that you could put into the things, and that when we review it, we can take that into consideration. Great question.
Somebody asked a good question. You gave us you disclosed the top secret price for the solar panels. Some folks are wondering about the average cost of batteries and I guess I don't know if the solar charge. I mean, is the EV charger the same thing as batteries? That's the same.
No, the EV charger is a separate thing. So you can go have an EV charger without battery backup. I have to give a politician's answer because it's highly customizable. What I'll do is I'll give you a range, and I'll tell you why there is a range. It depends on what you want to back up. So, you know, when you go with batteries, you're going to just back up kind of maybe 7 or 8 circuits of your home, what are called your critical loads. So not all of your home circuits. And that can vary from one person to another based on the size of the home. Also, another factor that affects the price of battery installation is the physical installation itself. So depending on where the battery is installed, where they couple with solar, you know, for example, if you have to do some drywall, that's going to increase the cost. What we see typically now for Virginia, conservatively, I would say anywhere from, to add battery storage to a system is about $10,000 to about $15,000. And again, it will be dependent on what you choose to back up. And that's with a lithium ion solution, typically a Tesla Powerwall. So that, it's going to vary. You could probably get into something a little less expensive with lead acid batteries, but the lifetime costs of those are more expensive because you have to replace them. So we again have a really great battery storage guide, and then we have the recorded webinar. And since there's so much interest now in batteries, not only in Virginia, we're actually doing some work in Puerto Rico, which is really exciting. So we're really starting to see more of those installations.
There was a good question that made me realize I don't know as much about EV chargers as I thought. So somebody was asking if their car isn't in the garage during the day, would they still benefit from an EV charger, which made me realize that I've always assumed that it's a battery system, so you can charge at night, even when the sun isn't shining on an EV charging station. But now that question is making me double check.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. Your EV charger is going to be hooked up to the grid. It's really it's not made to work with batteries, although there is probably some designs that you could do if you wanted to make sure that all of your energy for your car is from the sun. But really the best way to ensure that your car is charged from solar power is to charge it during the day when the panels are working. And chances are those electrons might be flowing into your electric vehicle charger, maybe some of it your light, but that's the best way to do it. At night, obviously when your panels are not working and if you're not feeding anything from battery storage, if you had any, that's going to be drawn from the grid. Kind of a fun fact that I like to think of, because I have an EV charger, it's just a level 1. I like to plug my car in at night because a lot of the power that's generated in the middle of the night is from nuclear power. So about 1/3 of our electricity here in Virginia is nuclear powered. And then at night, a bigger proportion of that is from nuclear power, which no matter what your view is on nuclear waste, it is a carbon-free source of electricity. And at night, because those power plants are harder to cycle down, you're going to have a bigger proportion of nuclear at night or during times when there's not a lot of peak demand. I hope I answered that.
We've had a couple questions about homeowners associations and the approval processes for homeowners associations. I'm more familiar in Maryland where there are some laws that protect solar from intrusive HOAs, but I'm curious how it works in Virginia.
So that was actually where we had some legislative success last year, where we passed a rule that made it, or a law that made it harder for homeowners associations to restrict solar. So how this works is before homeowners associations were allowed to impose reasonable restrictions based on aesthetics or based on homeowners associations rules for the community. And what we found is that those restrictions in practice were not reasonable. So the new law, which is SB 504 and HB 414, those were actually both patroned by Fairfax representatives. Delegate Carrie Delaney and Senator Chap Peterson were the patrons of those bills. But what we did is we defined what an unreasonable restriction is. And an unreasonable restriction is one that if the HOA dictates, for example, that the panels be placed on the back of a home, if it meets either one of the following criteria, it's unreasonable. If it decreases the production of the originally designed system by 10% or more, it's unreasonable. So if you had it on the front and they say it's on the back, if it reduces that production by 10%, it's unreasonable. If also it increases the cost of the originally designed system by 5%. So let's just say you wanted to produce 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year, but the HOA dictates you change the placement of those panels to the back of the house. In order to get that 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity production, instead of an 8 kilowatt system, you have to do an 11 kilowatt system. That would be an unreasonable restriction. So we have maybe, I don't know if we have access to, we could share it on the chat. We do have a blog post that explains it, but that was a significant victory because in our works in Virginia since 2014, we've documented over 300 installations that have been unreasonably blocked. So we formed this coalition, put those restrictions, and it's still being worked out. We came to a compromise with the HOA folks. So if your HOA is really pushing back against it, what you would do is get an independent third-party solar panel design specialist to document that. So we're working with a couple folks that are able to do that. So I gave you a really long answer, and to make it short is your HOA does not have the right to restrict your solar installation if it reduces the performance by 10% or it increases the cost of the system by 5% over the original design. Great question.
A couple of people asked about Tesla. I think they mean the charging stations, probably, or maybe the batteries. And some questions about how panels deal with snow in winter. And then finally, and I think maybe this final one could be our last. In Maryland and in DC now, there's community solar, so it's possible if your home doesn't work, you can subscribe to a common solar project, but I'm not aware of how that works, if at all, in Virginia.
Yeah, there was some recent legislation that does open up a small segment for community solar. It also focuses on LMI. And we're following the rulemaking process for that. So as it becomes clear what that means as the rubber hit the road, we're happy to share that. Right now, a lot of utilities have co-opted the term community solar, which basically means a subscription for some offtake of a central solar plan at a little bit higher premium. That's really not community solar, and that's what we've typically had in Virginia until this last session. So there may be a little bit of an opportunity for folks to benefit from that, but it remains unclear as to how that program is going to shake down. The other question I think was a good question was, how do panels hold up in snow, wind, rain, hail? The panels themselves are really designed to be super durable. They're designed to withstand hail. In fact, I've from experience maybe had a couple instances where people said they had hail damage from hail on their panels, but also that same part of the roof that wasn't covered by panels was also damaged. They are designed according to local permitting jurisdiction rules based on wind loading and snow loading. So they're designed for deadweight snow. In order to pass the final permitting process, they have to adhere to that. For example, if you were to put panels on your house in Virginia Beach, I believe it has to be designed to 120 mile per hour winds. So they are designed to withstand that. Just anecdotally, there is a really good image of from after one of the hurricanes, I think 2 years ago in 2018 in Florida, that showed how a hurricane really destroyed some of the roofs of some of the houses, but the panels were still on. I think we might be able to dig that up. So the take-home message is that panels are really designed to be robust. Any wind, rain, or snow, they're going to be able to withhold that. We also recommend that you don't do anything to clean it. We get enough rain here in the Mid-Atlantic that it's not worth getting up on your roof or doing anything. So maybe the last one, and feel free to interrupt me, Joel, if I'm not getting all of this. So 2 things on Tesla. Tesla Powerwall is probably one of the more commonly sourced battery backup systems. It is available as part of this co-op, so the installer SCS does offer it. You might also be referring to Tesla's new offer where they're, I think, going to offer super competitive pricing. We also hear a lot about Tesla roofs. Here's my take-home message with Tesla. I'm a big fan of them. When it comes to any sort of offer that they're giving a discount or Tesla or roof, I'll believe it when I see it. They've been talking about the Tesla roof shingles for the last 3 years in Virginia. To my knowledge, they are still not available. Also, if you're looking at some of their materials about low-cost installation, that's great, and it could very well be a good product. But what we focus on is tried and tested technology that is being deployed in Virginia right now. and I don't mean to sound crass, but there's a difference between a shiny brochure that looks really cool and marketing materials and actually getting the technology deployed. So I'm really looking forward to Tesla actually deploying some of their technology. After that, I'd love to see how it performs. At this point, besides the batteries and the vehicles, we just haven't seen a lot of it in Virginia to make that distinction.
Great. I think at the hour and a half mark, we can probably conclude. Folks are welcome to continue asking their questions when they fill out the form or by following up. Maybe somebody can drop the Sun contact information in the chat one more time in case anyone wants to ask their questions.
Great. Feel free to follow up with our team. You know, again, the process is we're designed to be there to answer your questions. So there's, you know, no such thing as a dumb question. I say that having taught middle school. So, yeah, but seriously, you know, feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help you at all stages of the co-op or even through membership.
It was really wonderful to join with you today. There were, for most of the time, there were like over 35 people in addition to us listening and learning together. So gratitude to everyone. Thanks for shifting to solar, and gratitude to all of our speakers and co-sponsors and all the folks, the congregations that invited folks to join us. It's really wonderful to be doing this work together.
Thank you all to the communities of faith that work so hard. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Signing off. Farewell.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.